Hello and good morning, and thank you for joining us today for this, our fourth Crisis Coach session in the 2018 webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about prevention before escalation, and this is part one of a two-part session. Next month, we're consolidating our sessions. There will be two sessions, one for schools and one for businesses, and we will feature former Secret Service agent Jason Russell. And I heard this presentation just recently at a conference. Jason is Firestorm's Chief Security Officer, and I sat in on his session at Disaster Recovery Journal. It was fantastic, so I asked him if he would do a special webinar for all of our webinar attendees. So I look forward to seeing you next month on that session, and thank you for joining us today on this. We, as always, would like to connect with you on social media, and you can find us on Twitter at Firestorm Soul, on Facebook at Firestorm Solutions. We are continuity experts on YouTube channel, where you can see recordings of all sessions that we do and other information. And on LinkedIn, we're Firestorm Solutions, LLC. And if you stay up to date with us there, you can see our newsletter and find out what conferences we'll be attending and where we can meet and chat. So we do look forward to connecting with you in all of those ways. Anytime you want to connect with us in social engagement, you can use the hashtag CrisisCoach, and we'll see that, and we will respond. Our attorneys like us to remind you that this exercise or webinar is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. Any work product provided by Firestorm should be read in conjunction with guidance given by national, regional, local authorities, as well as your organization's personal counsel. And moreover, the information given and comments made in this webinar should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. With that said, I'd like to introduce you to our underwriters for today's session and our wonderful partners for many years. From the University of Alabama, Brenda Truelove. Brenda, take it away.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us some of your valuable time this morning. I know there's plenty for you to be doing back at the ranch, and we appreciate your time today so much. We are focusing our efforts today on our BERTHA program, which we are very proud of, and working in conjunction with Firestorm to deliver that online training material to all Alabama K-12 schools free of charge. It's an online training program that functions as part of a school's overall school violence prevention program. And really it empowers the schools and the folks who are serving there on the behavior management team to be able to assess certain incidences that might happen at school and to monitor students for their behaviors they may be exhibiting, to really find out, does this incident pose a threat of violence to themselves or to others? For 1 year, the license for access to the training platform is being underwritten by Firestorm and the University of Alabama for all Alabama K-12 schools, which is quite a number of schools. The sign-up deadline for that is September 1st. There is also access for schools outside of the state of Alabama. And the graphic showing on Karen's screen this morning is a wonderful visualization of the BERTHA program components that starts with awareness. The second step, which can't be left out, is your intelligence network, which includes, of course, your anonymous reporting, all the other things that are so important in gathering information or intel. And then where you will store this data along with the actual BERTHA process itself, which has been distilled and broken down into 4 what really look like simple steps, but it's quite a thorough process that takes folks who are dealing with behaviors of concern every day, and it helps them take that information, categorize it, screen it, monitor it, and then keep up with it for future need. So we're very fortunate that more than 5 years ago, we started working with Firestorm, and particularly Mr. Jim Satterfield and myself, we have just forged a lifelong friendship and collegial working relationship that has blossomed into this opportunity for us to put BERTHA in an online training program and to offer it to Alabama K through 12 schools free for the first year. You're seeing on the screen, actual screenshots from the training platform and our cute emojis we have that I'm really proud of, that really tries to make the learning fun and informative as well. So we're very delighted to be on the call today. If you have questions about licensing information, the phone number is showing on the screen. And if you'd like to just see a little more information about BERTHA, it's bertha.ua.edu. If you'd just like to chat with me about it and ask me questions without doing anything online, that's fine. I understand, and I'm here to chat with you. Karen, thanks for your efforts today. I always learn something when you're the moderator, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda, and of course, thank you to the University of Alabama. I am very happy to be presenting the session today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about BERTHA, but we're actually going to be talking about the underpinnings of that program prior to an actual event, and we're going to be talking about it in both the business and the school point of view, because I know we have a mix of people on the call. So what we're going to do today is really look at the behaviors that happen prior to an event. Our philosophy is you could arm everyone within a school environment or a business environment, and we believe that would just simply create chaos. When officials responded to a crisis, how would they know who the person who was actually an active shooter or a victim was? It would be really challenging to discern. It just creates chaos. And the reason people bring that up is because we're looking for answers. Well, at Firestorm, we've been working on this for 10 years, and we have responded to some of the most high-profile, both workplace and educational environment shootings or other deadly weapons, more than any other company. I don't know that for a fact. I can't say that. But we have responded to some of the most high-profile situations. And so I really believe that this is the answer, and that is identifying behaviors of concern beforehand and then working to create an environment that allows reports and other pieces of information to be centralized and actionable. And that's the key to this whole point of view. You know us, we are Firestorm. Since January, and we've been chatting quite a bit about our services, Firestorm has broadened its scope and clarified its mission. And our mission is focused specifically on crisis and risk solutions. We work with major insurance companies, major law firms, especially in the human resources area, and we work to provide crisis response and risk solutions. In that, we provide professional services, which are assessments, plans, training, exercises, knowing exactly what to do in a crisis. A lot of people tell you, here's the book, go do this, but they don't really show you how to do it. So in addition to the what to do, we really focus on the how to do the what. Our People Solutions is a recent acquisition. We have a terrific team headed by a wonderful woman named Cheyenne Marling. Many of you know Cheyenne, and she is leading our sourcing for new talent for organizations. So if you're looking for great people in this space with this area of expertise, or if you're looking for something new for your own career, or also analytical solutions, providing data. We provide 6 studies a year. I'd like to invite all of you that are in the IT area to visit our website for more information on participating in our IT resiliency study. It's ongoing now. It will close at the end of May. And if you participate, you will receive a complimentary copy of that report. Our security solutions and intelligence solutions combine to support our entire behavioral risk threat assessment program, but they're more than that. You can start from the very beginning when you're drawing up the blueprint for your school or your business and bake in security protocol to the design and much more. So thank you for supporting us over our history, and we look forward to a long history in the future with you. I am Karen. I keep saying I'm going to get a new picture, and I don't, so I will try by next month. We've been talking for the last couple of months about working on not believing that a crisis event is a singularity. People always say, that's a shame that happened, but it's never going to happen here. And then it happens. And so we really want to view events as something that has a recognizable occurrence and life cycle and then a predictable series of stages so that we can prepare and train for the eventuality. It doesn't have to be this type of a crisis, but if we practice and train on any type of a crisis and build that into our corporate culture and become a culture of preparedness advocates, then we'll find that our businesses, our schools, our organizations will be much more resilient. It will raise our profile. Everyone wants to work for one of those companies that's the best places to work, and resiliency and preparedness are brand attributes. And so we want you to focus on creating a better organization for your employees, your customers, your vendors, everyone involved, so that we can all not only be more prepared, but also, we believe, save lives. So we're talking today about identifying behaviors of concern. And I want to take you to what the key components of an effective overall violence prevention program are. First of all, we must have leadership support. Well, thank you for being on the call, because you are thought leaders by attending this session. Let's bring other leaders into this conversation and take it to the senior leadership level. Let's make sure we're at the table, we're being heard, and we have buy-in from the very top, from the board level to senior leadership, because that's where that real change will happen and it will become part of the culture. Make sure your organization has clear policies and procedures. You know, the best thing we can do for our employees and others that interact with our organizations are to have clarity of purpose, to treat our employees with dignity, and to be clear and articulate in our expectations and communications. Along with that, we must have clear policies around weapons, around bullying and harassment, and do your background checks, both at the time of hiring and then annually thereafter. Make sure your building is physically secure and that you've done everything you can to protect the people in your care. You know, just before I was jumping on this call, I was watching a news organization filming some workers that were dangling from a scaffold that had collapsed in the wind against the side of a building in Florida. They were safely rescued, but we need to make sure everything from physical security to the equipment our employees use to do their jobs are well maintained and can keep our employees safer. And then we need to have a behavioral risk threat assessment program, or as Firestorm has called it, it is BERTHA. We like to think of BERTHA as Alice's big sister if you're an Alice organization. And after that, you must have an emergency and incident response plan in the situation that an event does occur. So let's talk a little bit about how we stop the madness. We asked you over the past year, we asked you and then many others in every session we did, we said, are you concerned about violence in your organization? And there was, I think, one person that said, no, not going to happen. There were about 8% of the people who said, well, no, I'm not really too concerned. But deep down in your hearts, really 92% of you said, I'm either somewhat or very concerned. So we know it's a possibility, and frankly, that awareness is progress. We have more progress to share with you. We asked you if you know how to anonymously report a behavior of concern in your workplace. And this is up from about 70% last year. 91% of you say, yes, you do. And that is terrific. We also asked you if you had a designated team that reviews behaviors of concern. 74% of you responded in the affirmative, and that's terrific. 26% of you said there was no team, and that's okay. We can work on that, right? Today is a great start. But I'm really thrilled to see these responses because it shows progress. Because we know that almost every disaster, every incident of school or workplace violence, in my memory, with the exception of Las Vegas, and I'm sure it's just we have not turned up the clues yet, but every act of terrorism was preceded by some type of warning signals. I dare say yesterday, the attack with the van in Toronto, that person had tried to see the president a couple of years ago. There were many, many signs that something was wrong. Once we identify the signs, it's our job after that to make sure people are listening, right? And those signs that we're reporting are actionable, and we can define what those actions are. Now, let's talk a little bit about threatening behavior versus a behavior of concern and what the difference is. I'm going to give you a simple visual only because Roxanne the Wonder Dog is here with me, and she likes it when I talk about her breed. We know the difference between an animal that is snarling and one who's not. That's a threat. We can see that threat. But there are other behaviors of concern that an animal might not exhibit that you need to know about. So I had a little dog once, and if you tried to pick her up from behind, she'd flip around and she'd nip you because she didn't like that. So that's a behavior that needed correction. It wasn't clearly threatening. It was something you couldn't see, but it was something we were aware of, and it needed correcting. So let's talk about that in the realm of people we work with. And a threatening behavior is very clear bullying, or someone is the victim of bullying. So they're either being bullied or they are the victim of it. And it's clear bullying. How about cyberbullying? You know, in the past, at least when you got home from work, you could put your feet up and say, well, you know, at least I'm not going to be bullied, you know, here in my home. But with technology, you are now bullied everywhere you go. You're bullied via text messaging, you're bullied via Facebook, you're bullied via email. So it's much more challenging to escape. And if you are the bully, it's much easier to gain access. Threatening behavior is clear when it comes to someone is being involved in fights or violence. You know, when we saw the Fiamma Canopy company workplace shooting, that situation had been going on for almost 5 years. There were clear indications that there was a significant issue, excuse me, and the person who eventually returned to the facility and killed people within that facility had a history of fights within the organization. Sadly, the organization terminated the victim instead of terminating the person who was actually the perpetrator of the crime. And there's a whole way to do that as well. We'll talk about that later this year. Is the person destroying property, their own or others? Are they taking a baseball bat to a car in the parking lot? That's a clear threatening behavior. Are there clear, direct, verbal or physical threats? Specific threats. If I don't get what I want, I am going to return to this place and I'm going to beat you up. It's a direct conditional threat. A veiled threat. Well, I don't want to say anything's going to happen to your car, but if I don't get this shift off, who knows what might happen. An indirect threat, just one of those vague threats. We know it's a threat. We're not sure why. It lacks specificity, but we know it's a threat. And then someone sees a weapon at work or in your organization. You know, I work with our intelligence tools, and I always have a search running for I'm scared at work. I saw a gun at work. And I am surprised at how often people will message via social media that they have seen a weapon at work, but they want to do it anonymously. They don't want their name or their information tied to it because they're afraid the person with the weapon will find out. And that's why one of the other points we're going to talk about today that's so important about that BERTHA program is the ability to anonymously report. Now, we've talked about clear threatening behavior, and so those are kind of clear, right out there threats. There are some behaviors that are pretty clear we want to make sure we're paying attention to, and that is comments about suicide. They're never a joke. Even if the person says, oh, you know I'd never do it, there's something you don't joke about. Intimidating comments about hurting someone else. You know, I made a very conscious effort about 20 years ago to take out of my phraseology, and sometimes it slips back in, a very New York Italian girl. And I don't ever say, oh, I just want to kill that person. Oh, I could kill you. I took it out of my vocabulary, out of my language, because it's just not something that we should joke about or say. So when we hear intimidating comments about hurting someone else, we're not talking about that per se, but we are talking about consistently violent language against someone else. How about fits of rage and inappropriate rage? And there's something interesting about this one particular point. Recently, our COO, Hart Brown, was doing a study and was looking for some information. And he was looking for the language and the syntax of active shooters. And you can find libraries of information for almost every active shooter event because almost all of them, with the exception of the Las Vegas shooter, has left some sort of a manifesto. And we study those. And the reoccurring theme is rage. Once rage moves into quiet indifference and lack of any empathy for human life at all, that rage just moves into that complete phase of indifference, is where we saw the change or the turn happen. So those fits of rage, and we need to understand them. And are they inappropriate? If someone accidentally spills a cup of water, has it suddenly become a huge incident? So we really need to keep our eye on those incidences. And as we mentioned, destroying property, their own or others. Now, other red flags might not be quite as clear, and that would be a fascination with weapons. Now, that's not to say people who are weapons enthusiasts are at all painted with the same brush. You couple that behavior with some other behaviors, and we need to look at that in a much more serious way. Someone who's fascinated with past criminals, their crimes and violence, sadly, you can look up almost every shooter, and there's going to be a tribute site to them, whether in work or school. And it's a very sad thing. Depression. We have seen too many stressors visited upon someone who already has a propensity for violence. They've suffered too many losses at one time, and that may be the catalyst that pushes someone just over that edge. We see substance abuse, drugs and alcohol, and suspected abuse in the home. And then you'll note major changes in behavior. Someone who used to be gregarious is suddenly withdrawing from coworkers, more absences, withdrawing from friends and activities, possibly someone who used to be fastidious is suddenly appearing unkempt, and there are probably reasons for that. So those are some less subtle clues that we need to look for. When we look at these, Firestorm has developed a behavioral snapshot to help you as you start classifying these parts and pieces. As Brenda mentioned, for schools, there is training provided by the University of Alabama. It's accessed via their website, and you will receive a certificate, your team will, from the university. And it involves these parts and these pieces. So let's look a little bit more closely. First, let's look at straight up behaviors, okay? The person has a history of discipline problems. So if you're sitting on the phone today and you're saying, I think I have someone in my organization right now that could be a threat to themselves or others, but I'm just not sure. Let's start at the beginning, do a threat assessment. We're going to look at their behaviors. And first we need to know, do they have a history of discipline problems, and do they have access to firearms, or do they use firearms that we know about? Are they also right now taking criticism poorly, and they can't let it go? So they've got to fight to be right, whether they are or not, because they're feeling it's a personal attack. Is there suddenly been a dramatic change in their work performance? Someone who is a really high performer suddenly is just out of it, or purposely making errors, even possibly sabotaging work. Do they suddenly have consistently poor relationships within the work environment, especially if they had been healthy relationships previously? Are they preoccupied with policies and procedures? As a matter of fact, do they not only perceive those policies and procedures to be unfair, but do they perceive them to be focused specifically on something they did or in response to an action they took? Are there emails, text messages, or phone calls concerning? They may not contain threatening language, but they may be disjointed. A suddenly articulate person may be communicating in a way that is completely out of character. Someone who had never communicated before may suddenly be communicating in a flurry. Is there direct or indirect threatening communication that we discussed earlier? Have you seen verbal statements, drawings, or writings that may contain violent images? We did a study. I worked with someone once during a termination. I worked with a company that we helped companies when they were downsizing large groups of employees. And on one employee's desk, we found it was like something out of The Shining, quite frankly. Instead of "every good boy deserves favor" typed thousands of times, it was pictures of a gun, the same gun, and there were almost 60 per page, these small black guns, and pages of them. And no one realized that's what the employee had been doing all day long. Is there a history of violence, anger, or aggressive behavior with the individual? Is there inappropriate language or conduct, harassment, sexual harassment, or intimidation? Is there drug or alcohol abuse? And this is a challenging one. First of all, we have many states where marijuana is legal. Just as alcohol is legal, we don't bring it into and do it in the workplace, especially if we can cause harm to others. But there are other kinds of drug and alcohol abuse we must keep our eyes open for. Prescription drugs can be abused, and many people don't realize they're abusing prescription drugs because they're prescribed. Additionally, people may not be under a doctor's care because of cost or other limitations and may be self-medicating. And combinations of self-medications can be creating a heightened issue, and that's something we must be aware of. Think about this, everyone on the call today. If you know or find out that someone in your organization who is exhibiting these types of behaviors is self-medicating, and you can put that program into an that person into an employee assistance program and are able to put them in a position where they are not self-medicating, mixing dangerous chemicals together, and their behavior becomes along with that illness comes medication and depression. And we need to be able to be compassionate and treat people with dignity in the way we reach out to and try to assist them. Additionally, we had an employee once who exhibited some very frightening signs of escalating anger. And when we asked if there had been a noticeable change in their hygiene and appearance, someone said, well, yeah, I mean, he stopped bathing and using deodorant a long time ago. The reason was because the person had lost their home. They'd been through a divorce, they'd lost their home, and they were living in their car. And they could only bathe about once a week. They went to a Y or a gas station. Nobody knew that was going on with this person. And at that point, once people were made aware, the community came together and really helped this person out. So that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes you cannot help someone, but we must be aware. This is an example of what happens when when we don't know, or things can escalate. There was a Houston workplace shooting at the end of last year. He did contract work for the business, but he hadn't been there in almost a year. Someone said that he had started to unravel, and physically he looked ill. And then he quit. He stopped working on cars. He wasn't doing anything. He lost his apartment. He was sleeping in his car. And he returned after almost a year and opened fire and killed 2. Now, let's look at interactions with social and peer groups and coworkers. First of all, do we see someone who suddenly is holding a grudge? Are little things suddenly being held against the person forever? Is there odd or erratic behavior that suddenly is creating fear in other people? Dangerous behavior. We had a report one time. We were working with an employee. We were trying to help separate, and the tipping point was probably a poor use of words on this, but was an employee had reported that on their lunch break, they had gone up to the roof to smoke a cigarette, and this person who was exhibiting dangerous behaviors walked on the parapet on the roof. It was one of those flat roofs with a concrete buildup. And if they had fallen, I think it was 16 floors down, and it was a windy day, just completely freaked out the coworker. That kind of behavior, it actually was a good thing it happened, because it rang the bell and the person was able to, there was able to be an intervention. Is the person intolerant of differences? And those differences could be anything: brown shoes, black shoes, green shoes. Is there some social withdrawal? Someone, again, who was gregarious. There's a birthday party in the office or a shower, or someone gets promoted and everybody stands around and congratulates the person, and this person is isolating themselves, doesn't want anything to do with it. Is this person the victim of bullying or violence, or being a bully? Do they identify with violent groups? Do they talk about that a lot in especially those limited social engagements? When you walk by the person's computer, do you see that they're visiting sites while they're at the workplace that may be in support of some of those violent groups? Do you observe angry or threatening messages on social media? You know, when we monitor social media, we don't look at anything that's private. We can't. And what we do is look at publicly posted social messages. We simply aggregate them. And we are consistently surprised at what we see. And you have not only a right, but a responsibility to know if someone is mentioning your company or your employees in a violent or aggressive manner in a public forum. So we look at everything from the most popular sites like Twitter and Instagram to some of those parts of the darker web, the Chans, the 4chan and 9chan, and those types of distasteful discussion boards, because that's where these types of things occur. So if you don't have intelligence in place, you really got to think about doing that, because it's part and parcel of this overall program. Is there name calling or abusive language going on? Is there a history of a poor response to limit setting rules and regulations? All of this involved can create a violent response. If there is suspected or confirmed abuse going on in the home, if there is a change in status or multiple losses, a death, divorce, custody issues, everyone says it can't happen here, and here we are. It happened here. This person was a painter. He was on probation for a series of convictions. He had a criminal record. He worked at this place. He got angry, came back and killed 3 and shot 14. And along with that are some complex psychological behaviors that we need to be looking at. And that is where the professionals need to be called in, either on staff or bring a third party in, an objective third party, so that we can identify paranoid thoughts, delusional thinking, poor coping skills, excessive feelings of isolation or hopelessness, a sense of entitlement, suicidal thoughts, mood disorders, self-medication for mood disorders, over-controlling anger, under-controlled anger, feelings of being bullied, picked on, or persecuted. That silence is important. It's important that we understand that these shootings happen within that moment of silence. Someone can respond and return to your campus, to your corporate office building, to your corporate campus, and be brandishing a weapon, be creating a direct threat of violence, fight, cause a fight in the parking lot, at the door, destroy property, go into a rage, break windows, or attempt suicide on your property. You know, there was $38 million were awarded recently for a shooting that happened at a Kraft plant in Northeast Philadelphia. The actual instance happened in September of 27. The shooter had an argument with a couple of coworkers and went out to her car, or I can't remember, she returned home and came back with a .357 Magnum. She wasn't stopped by security in the way that she was supposed to be. They just waved her through. And that's what that's from. You can implement a great program for very small investment and weigh that against the loss of 2 people's lives or 1 person's life, and the ultimate challenges that may happen in your organization financially as a result. There are numerous instances of workplace shootings that happen every day. And we simply want you to be able to have a structure and a program in place to respond to that. So these behaviors of concern are going to culminate in either your intervention and saving time and lives and enriching the life of the person that you're able to intervene for, not always, but we hope, and the difference in actually having an issue occur. You know, if you could just stop one act of violence, a death, or a suicide, that is the goal here for your organization. And again, it's just connecting the dots. We see someone who's having escalated arguments. They're receiving poor performance reviews. They're getting upset with coworkers and vaguely threatening. You guys are going to be sorry one day. You're going to read about this one day. Absentee rates increase abruptly. Someone's being tired on social media of being told they're a loser. We watched as an employee in an organization, we were monitoring via social media, and we watched as an employee walked from one end of a plant to the other, and it was a very large plant. We watched as his anger escalated. While he was walking, he was texting, and not texting, but posting on Twitter. And he said, rage growing by the hour. He was fueling his escalating rage as he was walking toward a decision maker's office. And that's the kind of behavior that we want to see. And that's what our behavioral risk threat assessment program is for. It's a program and a process, as Brenda mentioned, that is designed to help you assess and then create an actionable plan to respond to potential violence. First through awareness, then through that intelligence network that includes monitoring, it includes anonymous reporting, which is very important, some type of call center, peer and colleague reporting, metrics, performance issues, absenteeism, and then all of that must be kept in a central repository. Remember, the challenges here, especially if you're in a significantly large organization, is that pieces of information may not be connected, so that you can never put the pieces together to see a pattern. Many organizations will just shift a problem into a different department or in a different place and hope eventually the problem goes away. That is absolutely the worst response to threats of violence. So once you have these beginning pieces, awareness and intelligence network of central repository, we then want to implement the BERTHA process. One of our key architects, Wendy Ruffcorn, is outstanding on speaking to you on this subject if you'd like to learn more. And it involves 4 key steps: intake, screening, case management, and record keeping in that central repository. And there's training available. This is the overview of the components of the program. I'm happy to share this with you. And if you look into your GoToWebinar dashboard over on the side of your screen, you'll see that we've also included how to spot the warning signals. It's an infographic download that you can download today and share within your organization. Remember, we need to train all staff on behaviors of concern. You have to have a behavioral management team that's trained to review and then understand those behaviors. You have to have an open source intelligence program that allows your leadership and that team to understand what's being said and receive early warning signals, and that includes an anonymous reporting tool. You then need a central repository where you can keep all of these disparate pieces of information in a central place in an organized way, and have a detailed process for then developing action plans to monitor individuals where the pieces come together and show there is a potential for violence. So what's next? Download that infographic. You can contact Firestorm at webinars@firestorm.com for a self-guided assessment. We can do a high-level assessment of your organization. It takes about 45 minutes. It's a good conversation on the phone. And we can give you a document that will really say, you know, you're doing great in these areas, but there are a couple of areas we feel that you can improve. And from there, we'll explain the BERTHA program to you in more detail if you'd like. And of course, Brenda Truelove is also available to answer questions. Next month's session is outstanding. Again, it's with our Chief Security Officer, Jason Russell, formerly of the Secret Service. I've seen the session, and it is a fantastic follow-up to today's session, because Jason is going to talk about what to do when that active or deadly weapon enters your property. It's a fantastic presentation, and I know that you'll enjoy it, so please do grab a seat for that. Brenda, would you like to close and tell us anything at the end of today?
Thank you, Karen. I'm always so impressed with the information and knowledge that you share, and I always take away a few notes and go back and review those. I'm sure that folks on the call today are going back to their desk and going, I need to do a few things, do a little homework. So here at the University of Alabama, it's the week prior to finals, so there's a lot of studying going on. So I'm sure the same will be said for those on the call today. Thank you for the opportunity to learn more, to be in thought leadership with you and the Firestorm folks. And we're just here to help, just trying to do our part in this complicated world that we live in today. So if anyone has any questions or would like to talk with me, my information is showing on Karen's slide. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you to the University of Alabama, and thank you everyone on this call for taking the time out of your day to think about how you can make your organization one step safer. Thank you. That will end our call for today. Appreciate your joining us, and have a great day. Goodbye.